We are going to, as soon as we finish going over the agenda, we are going to quickly go into return to public hearing, where we have two our things to discuss. One, citizen petition for the ledges. The other is 10 Converse Place. From there, we will probably actually continue public hearing for at least one of those, and then move into the meeting agenda of board and staff updates, town meeting reports, approval of meeting minutes. We have no development reviews tonight. We do have a guest coming later tonight, Hilda Wong Du from Winchester Arts, who's going to be presenting to the planning board and try to see if there's some ways we can collaborate with Arts Winchester. And from then we will adjourn with our next meeting being immediately before town meeting on the 28th. So with that, I would welcome a motion to move into public hearing. I believe we need a motion and a second and a roll call, or I believe we do. Thank you.
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? John?
Aye.
Carrie?
Aye.
Nick?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Vote is unanimous. So with that, we will move into a continuation of the public hearing for the ledges articles 5 and 6. We didn't know the numbering 2 weeks ago when we continued the public hearing. Article 5 is to release a portion of the common area open space on the property from the ledges. And Article 6 is to rezone the parcel from PRD to RD20. Now, specifically, we're holding this public hearing, or we're continuing this public hearing because of the rezoning in Article 6. But because the articles are interconnected, we've been told that we as a board are free to make a recommendation on Article 5 or Article 6 or both or neither one. It's up to us how we choose to move on this. There are issues surrounding whether town meeting can take up Article 6 if we do not recommend favorable action. They're detailed in a memo that we should have in the packet, and I hope you all have read. We also asked town council to be present, and we're going to ask him to explain to us what's in that memo, just so that in case there are any questions. Ultimately, we are here to complete our statutory obligation under Mass General Law, which reads, no zoning ordinance or bylaw or amendment thereto shall be adopted until the planning board has held a public hearing at which interested parties shall be given an opportunity to be heard. So that's what we're doing here tonight. So as far as the order of the hearing, we will have Jay explain to us up first any issues that are important for us to know. And then I'm going to give the petitioner from the ledges up to 3 minutes for any updates they have. Really, I'm not trying to be too much of a stickler. We just want to try to move things along. Then we're going to take questions and comments from members of the audience, up to 3 minutes from members of the audience. And then I should also note that we had one public comment by email that's in the packet. We then move on to discussion, questions from the board, and motions, if any, by the board. And I will just say that because of the timeliness of town meeting being in less than 2 weeks, while we only have 4 members of the board here, I'd prefer if we could take action tonight. And if for whatever reason we have a hung committee, we can reconsider it, but they really need to know what they can do as far as moving forward for town meeting. So, and then after that, I will send a memo to the town meeting moderator, writing how we voted on if we voted on Article 5, but how we voted on Article 6. And then of course, I'll report in our town meeting presentation on both as well. So with that, I would ask if Jay Tallerman, town council, is here, if he would be willing to speak to the issue I mentioned about being Article 6 being able to come before town meeting, just so we can all understand what what our role is here, but also what happens depending on how we vote. Jay.
Thanks, Brian. Again, Jay Tallerman, Town Council. We've been asked to take a look at this for a variety of reasons. One, because I review all articles for sufficiencies to form and legality, and then also how they might be laid out for town meeting. The form of both articles are fine. They are perfectly fine and present, notwithstanding some of the procedural issues, items that could be acted on by town meeting. The problem arises with the fact that these are the same articles that were presented less than 2 years ago. And under the Zoning Act, Chapter 48, Section 5, you can't do repeats within 2 years if there was not favorable action on your article. It's been suggested that because the applicant didn't seek a motion on the articles, that there was no unfavorable action on them. Our opinion is to the contrary. There's no such thing, and this is all in my memo of April 4th, 2025. I believe at this point it's essentially a public document. So there's no way under law to remove something from a warrant. It's on the warrant once the warrant is posted. It could have been removed potentially before the posting of the warrant, but once it's on the warrant, it's fair game for the town meeting to take. So for instance, even if an applicant suggested, hey, we don't want to move this forward, we want to wait till next year on this. We're not ready. It could be for very altruistic reasons. I'm not putting motive on any of this stuff. It is still on the warrant, and any other person at town meeting could actually submit a motion on it. It still is available for action to be taken by town meeting. So what does it mean then when town meeting doesn't take an action? And for that, we have to look to kind of history and practice and slightly less clear body of case law. But what evolves from that is that through treatises and sources, as well as, to me, common sense, acknowledged by the courts, if you fail to take action or you fail to make a motion, that's tantamount to negative action, meaning anything that isn't positive action is essentially negative action. So an article that isn't acted on, in other words, any article, not just a zoning article, that isn't acted on by town meeting essentially fails. Because if you don't move it, it fails. It is unfavorable action. No action is treated as unfavorable action. No motion is treated as a negative motion under available treatises. Now, Robert's Rules of Order run the Winchester town meeting. That's kind of a minority procedural treatise. But Robert's Rules of Order say nothing about town meeting. For town meeting, the courts have generally relied upon other Massachusetts procedural sources, such as town meeting time, which is based on Roberts, but geared solely to town meeting. And the sources that I reference for some of this come right out of town meeting time, which say a negative motion could be no motion, or it could be a motion to indefinitely postpone or to refer, or for another town meeting or anything else like that. Our view, and I think it's supported by kind of common sense and the available treatises, is that when you fail to take action on something that's before town meeting and town meeting dissolves without action being taken, then that automatically fails. The action sought doesn't happen, so it's a negative action. So our opinion has been that this cannot be acted upon by town meeting unless, and this is in the statute, the planning board recommends it for a favorable action. So the planning board has to issue a report to town meeting on all zoning bylaws presented at town meeting. If the planning board says, hey, we recommend favorable action by a majority of those voting for the planning board, constituting at least a quorum of the planning board, then town meeting can take a motion and act on this. If planning board doesn't do that, then town meeting, the moderator shouldn't take a motion at all on that. And, we'll speak to the moderator if that comes to it. But ultimately, the planning board gets to review this. If the planning board says, hey, yeah, this is totally fine, we recommend it, even if their recommendation is lukewarm, even if there's a minority report, even if ultimately the planning board references some negatives to it, and I don't know what the planning board is thinking about this article. I haven't checked in on any of this with your hearings, then town meeting can act on it. Otherwise, town meeting, in my opinion, in our opinion, can't act on it if the planning board doesn't recommend favorable action, either by recommending no action or by recommending negative action. Our position would be that the moderator shouldn't take a motion on it at all at town meeting. We source this out in our memo. I'm not going to go through it. I'm happy to answer questions about it, but we looked at it up and down to see if there was any leeway, if there was any substantial new evolving case law that supported a different conclusion. But I just, in my history of going to hundreds and hundreds upon town meeting, failure to take an action on something is generally treated as a failure of the proposition that's before the town meeting. And that forms the basis of our kind of our opinion. So there you have it. Happy to answer questions. I know some of this stuff isn't necessarily intuitive, so if the board itself has any questions on it, I'm happy to chime in.
Thank you. That's super helpful. Before I open it to the board, I have a quick question. Is that only in reference to Article 6 and not Article 5, or are they
Correct.
both subject? So
Article
6,
5 is fine. It's not zoning. It is
okay,
trying to effectuate a kind of a waiver, so to speak, that was baked into a zoning approval, and also a restriction, but that restriction has since expired, but it was baked into the original zoning approval. So that is not a zoning article, and so that could go before town meeting.
okay, thank you very much. Do members of the committee have any questions on this? Carrie?
Yeah, thanks, Jay, I know you've put a ton of time into this, and I appreciate your expertise and all the thoughtfulness you've put behind this. I just have 2 points of clarity. So having withdrawn the article in the fall, the planning board did not take a vote on it. If a town meeting member had asked to hear it in the fall, it could have been heard. Is that right?
If anyone on town meeting floor, anyone said, I want to move this, because
Okay.
every town meeting member has a right to make a motion.
Okay, but that's not true in the spring. In the spring, let's say we decide we can't talk about the ledges anymore. We're not voting on it at all. A town meeting member, we can't take no action on.
Correct. I think
Okay.
it's a barrier from the entirety of town meeting. If the planning board doesn't give favorable action, our interpretation is that town meeting has no right to take it up at all.
But what if we take no action?
If you take no action, that to me is insufficient because the statute requires you to recommend its approval, to recommend the bylaw in order for it to go forward at this year's town meeting.
Okay. So we have to make a favorable recommendation for town meeting to hear it at all.
Correct. That's our opinion, yes.
That's not
Thank
the
you.
impression that the proponent was under at the end of the fall town meeting. That's been my concern all along.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus or anything like that, or where that information came from. If someone had asked me, what are the ramifications of this in the fall, and no one did ask me in the fall, I would have been of the same opinion on the spot, because this isn't the first time I've considered this kind of a proposition. So I mean, it's unfortunate. I think the applicant is bringing forth something that is a legitimate action at most town meetings if properly before the town meeting, and I'm not unsympathetic to where they find themselves, but
And
from
then
a legal perspective, I think that I can't come to a different conclusion.
if we can follow one more scenario through, if the planning board recommends lukewarm favorable action, it goes to the floor of town meeting votes it down. When can it come back? Ever?
So
Never?
Meaning if the planning, so just to
We
get your
recommend
hypothetical,
favorable action. It's heard by town meeting. Town meeting does not approve it.
2
So
more
then-
years.
2 years, and can they petition to be back on in the fall?
Yeah, sure. And if the planning
So
board,
even if town
as
meeting
long
votes
as
it
the
down.
planning board is recommending that it goes forward, that's the fail safe every single time.
So what is the 2 year, what is prevented in the 2 years? Like, what is the,
I think that, you know, I could probably trace the origin of this precisely through the legislative kind of files on this.
okay,
My guess is that it was an effort to kind of prevent things from town meeting having to take up significant debate on things that have just recently failed. It's not the only kind of barrier on reapplication under the zoning act. There are other barriers to filing for just the same special permit that you applied for within 2 years. So I think the whole of the zoning act has kind of been designed in a way so as not to maybe overburden both town meeting and the boards with just something that just gets thrown back and forth and back and forth and over again, hoping that someone will have a better day. The fact that otherwise altruistic petitions or articles like this get caught up in that web is perhaps unfortunate, but that is what I guess is the intent of that.
okay, and yet without approving it, every 6 months they will be back.
Well, yeah, I mean, ostensibly they could wait out the 2 years and do it.
But you're saying they can come back you're just saying they can come back every fall and spring town meeting in the same manner that they're back this spring.
Correct,
So they're-
and ask the planning board to keep recommending it over and over again.
Awesome. Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Jay. John, Nick, do you have any questions for Jay?
So I just wanted to clarify. So if they were to wait 2 years, and the 2 years, I assume we'd be counting from the fall town meeting. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned now that they're restarting the clock. Although if the planning board doesn't recommend approval and town meeting can take no action, I think I could probably see a reasonable a reasonable position that the clock would have run from the fall. If planning board recommended approval and there was either no action or unfavorable action, I think it would start the 2-year clock. But if town meeting is precluded from taking any action at all, then there's no negative or positive action that could be taken. And I think a favorable interpretation would be that the clock started in the fall and that they're now 18 months away rather than 24 months away.
So it would be fall 2026. Is that right? Yeah, 2026. And we have to endorse it for them to consider it.
You have to recommend its approval.
Yeah.
Again, it doesn't say how full-throated that recommendation has to be, but your report has to be, again, as Brian, I think, suggested at the beginning, there's multitudes of ways you can sketch out your report for town meeting. It could be the most tepid approval possible, or it could be a full-throated recommendation for approval. Either way, though, either of those would allow it to be acted on by town meeting.
And so presumably an applicant in this position could approach the board again this fall of 25, asking to be in town meeting. And if they were refused, we'd still be working with the November 2024 start of the clock.
If you don't recommend approval.
Right, yeah.
Correct.
But we could recommend approval in the fall of 25, and it would go to town meeting in the fall.
That's correct, assuming
Have
that
whatever
they
result
petitioned
happens.
again.
Right.
So I guess my question is, if we do recommend approval, would it, and I'm sorry if I missed the answer, would it go to town meeting for a vote this spring? Or is it being
Yes.
precluded from that? It would.
Yeah, if you recommend approval for this town meeting, that's the only thing technically before you right now. Then yes, town meeting can take a vote on it.
Okay.
And it would be because it's a zoning change and there's no affordable housing component, it would be a 2/3 majority required for passage.
Yeah, this is a generic 2/3 requirement for passage. Absolutely.
Any more questions from the board for Jay? If not, Jay, I'll thank you very much for all the work. I'll ask if you stay for a little bit because I'm going to welcome Rich to give Rich Bartel some time to speak. And I just want to make sure there's anything that he needs to address, that you might need to address before I move to questions and comments from the audience. So with that, Rich, I don't know if you can unmute yourself. If you have anything to add, and if you have nothing to add, I'm not going to force you to speak. But I just want to give you an opportunity to update us if there's anything update, or just speak your mind. You're still muted.
Rich, you have the ability to unmute yourself now.
I do now. Okay, everyone hear me? I assume.
Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thanks very much, and thanks for taking the time again to listen to the story. I'm going to take my 3 minutes and try and explain, just as some of you have already heard, a bit about the demographics of the ledges, and then to go through the list of where we think the town will benefit by approving the sale or the separation of the parcel and the rezoning of the parcel to allow it to be sold. As you know, the Ledges is a townhome community that has been built over 37 years ago. And the property is located here at 7 Wainwright Road. We have 110 units, 12 cul-de-sacs, and about 3 miles of private roadway spread over 56.375 acres. And we're not a 55-plus retirement community, although a lot of the people here are over 65. Many of them are still working. I want to let you know that 5 residents have been named Winchester Citizens of the Year. And also here are some of the more important demographics which describe us. We have 20 families. We have children K to 12, 9 of which live here, 8 of which go to the public schools. We have 6 multi-generational families. We have 29 singles who own, or actually now 27 singles who own units. We have 65 couples who are the owners of units, and we have now 8 units in transition. We have doctors and PhDs, 9 of them. We have professors, about 5, and we have at least 4 real estate agents who are all still working. And as I've said before, we have 22 dogs. I know them all by name. Don't know how many cats because nobody walks cats, and so I don't get to know who they might be. So how does Winchester benefit? Winchester will not benefit if this property remains fallow. It will be simply left to where it is as you see it right now if you've gone by the Wainwright property on Wainwright Road. But if we're permitted to separate the property and we are allowed to then get it rezoned, the property will add an additional tax revenue stream for the town. Additionally, there will be a 1.5% Community Preservation Act tax that could be collected. Right now, the town collects more than $1.5 million annually in real estate taxes from the Ledges properties. This means we've contributed $650,000 towards the educational budget. The 8 children take up approximately $150,000 of that, so we are leaving about $500,000 on the table for the benefit of other children in the town. We're being able to sell this piece of land to help us maintain the property values, so you can continue to tax us at the rates that you do. We will add approximately 23,000 square feet of land to the northern portion of the conservation restriction upon the sale of the lot, rounding up the north section of the conservation restriction to approximately 5 acres. So the town will benefit by adding additional property for the benefit and enjoyment of the public. And also, the town will benefit by something called a mitigation fee, and that mitigation fee needs to be approved by and set by the town, and with the net proceeds to the town at the transfer and the rezoning of the property. My suggestion is that this is a percentage, and the percentage should be based on that net fee. And my suggestion is a net fee of 0.25%, which is of the net proceeds from the sale. And also, I just want to close by saying that we really do love the Suckerbrook Reservation here, and I've recorded over 21 different animals on the trail cams out behind my condo, which really makes me feel comfortable and loving the spot that I live in. And I appreciate your time and listening to hope that you will approve the separation and rezoning articles. I note that the 2 articles published in the draft document for the warrant are lacking the background material, which I sent separately. And so I will resend those out to the town meeting members when I send out a note asking for their vote on this property.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So with that, I would like to move into any public questions or comments from the audience. Those will be limited to up to 3 minutes each. I don't want to cut anybody off, but also we have a lot of other things to do tonight. And if you have any comments that you think would be duplicative of other comments that have already been made, you can feel free to not speak, but of course this is your opportunity. And with that, I don't know the order hands were raised. I think I saw that Ann, Sarah had their hand raised first. So with that, if you could state your name and address, and please try to limit your comment to 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Ann Sarah. I'm at 5 Andrea Circle. My first question to you, Mr. Chair, is to please make this important memo public. Get it on a website. I will be writing the town planner and asking for that memo. And if it's okay, I'm probably going to put that on the TMMA website. So if anybody has a problem with it.
It's in the packet that you should be able to find
on
the planning board page.
That means it's already public. Terrific.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to put that on the TMMA page as well. Unfortunately, I didn't read that before tonight, and consequently, I'm not as well prepared as I should be. But I am a little bit confused about Mr. Tellerman's answer. Article 5 versus Article 6. Article 5 doesn't concern zoning, and Article 6 does. And yet at the beginning, he said, when a motion fails, it can't come back for 2 years. Doesn't matter whether it concerns zoning or not. And yet there's a difference between 5 and 6 about when the clock starts. So I'm a little confused about that. And I wonder if any clarification is warranted, because it sounded to me like some of the board members might have a little bit of confusion too. That's one of my questions. My biggest question though is what changed? Because my issue is that I believe that this was a covenant with the town and the ledges should honor that covenant. And I believe that this was withdrawn in the fall because the proponent knew that it was destined for failure. And consequently, it was withdrawn. So what's changed since the fall? Because unless something has truly changed, I don't see any reason to vote yes for it, certainly, but perhaps not even to entertain it. You know, for 2 years. I don't know. I don't really understand the legal background there, but just common sense, I don't want them to keep coming back and just hoping for a new planning board who doesn't remember all of the arguments we just made 6 months ago. So I think also finally, so that I really want to know what's changed. And finally, no, not finally yet. Are you adding conservation to Sucker Brick? How much versus how much is going away? So are you adding more than 20? Are you adding more than the property size to conservation? That's another question. And is that new? And is this mitigation fee new? And then finally, if the planning board were to feel like this should go before town meeting and therefore will give it some kind of approval, then I think that approval should be very, very qualified. You should say the only reason we're giving this for approval is so that you can vote on it. Because I think that you don't want to give the impression that you are for this unless you really are for it. And I hope that you are not for it, because if you drive by that property, it is going to be very difficult to develop, and it will not bring the money that they think it will. And we're not going to get the money that we think we will from it as a result. Okay, 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm going to actually have Jay address your first question as far as the difference between 5 and 6 as far as coming back in the 2-year time frame.
Yeah, no, my opinion only applies to the zoning article. It does not apply to the waiver article that has nothing to do with the zoning bylaw. So my opinion that one can go forward to town meeting. My opinion is it's only the zoning article that gets caught up in this procedural issue. Okay,
thank you. And actually, Rich, if you're so inclined, I would address the other 2 questions to you. What has changed since the fall, and will more than 20,000 square feet be added to the conservation land? 2 questions.
What's new? First of all, I'm new. So I was new to the whole town process, and I did not quite understand what was necessary to bring an article before the town meeting or even before the planning board. What I did was worked through what I thought would be the appropriate actions, and I was working with a new person, Taylor Herman, who was also working to guide me, and we're learning along the way. In terms of what's new, when we got to the town meeting time frame, I got a new knee. The second thing that happened with us is that we realized we had not done the appropriate neighborhood outreach. And so therefore we went out and we did the neighborhood outreach. And I actually went and sent letters out to the abutters and neighbors in the area to see if they could be comfortable with a piece of the land being developed right near them. The only people that responded were the people at 33, which is the direct abutters. And those abutters met with us twice, and then I further worked with them to identify trees that they would like to see retained if the property were to be developed. And I noted happily that none of the trees that they wished to be retained were in anywhere on the actual 20,000 square foot building lot. The second answer is yes, it's more than 20,000 square feet. It's approximately 23,000 square feet that will be added to the 4.6 acres that we've already previously identified in the northern section of the conservation restriction.
Thank you very much for those answers. Next, we'll move on to Pamela Court. I think you had your hand raised second. I might be wrong in the order, forgive me. It looked like we had a total of 3 hands raised. Given the timing, I'd like to just try to go with those 3 unless anybody has any last questions after that. We'll go with Pamela Court second. Pamela, I think that you'll need to be able to unmute. There you're on mute. If you could state your name and address for the committee, and then
Sure.
your public comment.
Pamela Court, 112 Arlington Street, Precinct 5. I have a question and I have some comments. I think the question, and that can be answered after I finish the comments. The question may be one for Mr. Tallerman, and that is that the reason why they'd be granted disposition I don't have the wording in front of me, but they would be able to sell the property would be for development. But if that zoning change doesn't go into place, then any property they sell can't be developed. If that's the case, does it make sense to vote yes on 5 if 6 doesn't get voted in? That's just a question that's a procedural question. I do have some comments about this. I think that we have to think about precedent here. And I think we need to be very careful. And I'm grateful to the planning board because I think the planning board does a really great job of adhering to precedent and paying attention to what is in the best interest of the town and what was the intent of different zoning regs and covenants and other things that the town entered into. And it is upon the planning board to ensure that the master plan is the guiding document for all of the different things that we do as a community. So there are a couple things. One is, I think voting to approve this, voting to recommend it for town meeting, no matter how lukewarm, to use language that was put out there, no matter how lukewarm that recommendation is, it is a recommendation. That means that when you go to town meeting, you will sit up there and then say, we did recommend this. Are you going to, after recommending it to town meeting, say we recommend unfavorable action? Usually when you guys bring zoning articles to town meeting, it's because you've reviewed them and believe them to be a benefit to the town for various reasons, and the guiding principles being those from the master plan. So I would ask you, when you are looking at this, to consider that this is not about expediency for the sake of getting something on the warrant or preventing somebody from petitioning you on a semi-annual basis to get approval for something. It's about making a decision that you believe as a board is in the best interest of the community based on the guiding principles of the master plan. So that's where my concern would be when you're making that decision. And I would hope that you would make the decision based on that. And actually, I'm just going to extend that comment goes to 10 Converse as well. When you're making that decision to use the master plan as the guiding principle for whether or not it's the right decision to make. Thank you.
Brian's computer just crashed, so I'm going to hold down the fort for a sec. Pam, was there a question to Jay there? Sorry.
Yeah, the question is, if 6 doesn't make it either through this process, through the planning board voting favorable action to move it to be legal business in front of town meeting, if you vote no, or if it does not pass at town meeting, then their permission to do what they want with that parcel by partitioning it off and selling it, it won't be a developable parcel. Is that correct? That if for whatever reason 6 doesn't go through because of the planning board or because of town meeting, it means that even if they sell that property can't be developed. Is that the case?
Yeah, that's correct, Pam. They need 3 approvals in order to develop that property. They need the waiver, which is a kind of a unique kind of vestige of the old approval. So that's Article 5. They need the zoning approval to change the zoning classification. And they're going to need to go back to the Zoning Board of Appeals and get an approval to add an additional housing unit on the property. So they're going to need all three of those in order to plunk a new unit on the property.
Thank you. That's helpful. And here I'll take the video off for a second. So I have sort of an extension question for you then, and that's if somebody were to purchase that parcel with the approval for another housing unit, or regardless of the approval of another housing unit, but if they were to get the waiver to sell that parcel, would somebody be able to buy it and develop it under 40B laws and bypass the waiver and bypass the like those planning board waivers? I'm just curious what happens. What are the consequences? I guess I want to make sure I understand the consequences of voting yes and no on any of these things when it comes before town meeting.
That's a pretty unique question on the 40B, if they wanted to carve off a piece there. I would maybe take the position, and I would have to think about it a little bit further, as to whether or not a condition in an underlying permit, which normally creates a restriction, could preclude them from going to 40B. Now, normally 40B can be used to waive any zoning conditions. So things that may arise under a zoning permit could be waived through 40B. So it's possible, although there's still some hurdles, it's possible that they could use 40B to bypass a lot of this. Now, it would be for 40B is no bargain. It's not that easy, but it would be for a small chunk of property, it would be a lot of work for, you know, and it'd take a lot of time to get it done. And there would have to be at least 25% affordable housing there too.
So much. I'm sorry, my computer died and I had to move to a new computer, so I'm sorry I left and I came back. So I missed some of that, but Pamela, did you get your question answered in my absence?
I did, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I apologize for disappearing and coming back. We have one last public comment before we move to board discussion and potential vote, which would be from Maura Sullivan. Maura Sullivan, if you can you can unmute, and then go ahead, state your name and address before you speak, please.
Hi, Maura Sullivan, 28 Stone Ave. I've already submitted a public comment in writing, so I'll just address the technical point of whether the planning board's a gatekeeper or not to town meeting. I don't believe you are. Looking at the relevant statute, I don't believe Winchester has acted unfavorably on the Ledge's petition. The planning board never voted on it, and town meeting wasn't even convened when the articles were withdrawn last fall. I couldn't find any case addressing what happens when an article is withdrawn before town meeting even starts. But I did find cases talking about the purpose of Section 5, which is to give some measure of finality to an unfavorable decision. And Jay mentioned that earlier, talking about not wanting to overburden a town. But in this case, I don't feel Winchester has been burdened at all because we haven't taken it up by town meeting or even the planning board voting on it. And we do this all the time. Articles are withdrawn. This just happened with the ESCAR petition. And so I don't think anyone would plausibly say that the town has acted unfavorably on the ESCAR petition. So in the absence of case law, the town must decide whether it's fair to argue now that the Ledge's petition can't be brought before town meeting unless the planning board votes yes. And I don't think that's fair to the Ledges or to the planning board, because this is tying the planning board's hands and preventing the board from voting on the merits. So I urge you to just focus on the task at hand, treat this like any other zoning change. Do you agree with it or not? And whether you vote yes or no, I think town meeting can then take up the article with your recommendation in hand. And it would be a real recommendation, not a tepid one just to kind of get it through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maura Sullivan. With that, I will close the public comment portion of this meeting, of the public hearing, and welcome the board members for discussion, question, comments, anything that you guys want to talk about. Carrie.
I mean, I could talk for days, but I'm going to keep it succinct here. It's very frustrating that we're in this position, but I completely agree with the commenters who are saying that we have to consider it exclusively as a zoning change. And I really do not like being in the position where that prevents town meeting from weighing in. But it would be disingenuous for us to make a recommendation that's just to move it to the floor of town meeting. In terms of the measure itself, I think about how much time we put into choosing the space for the mod and how much time we spent sort of like looking at exactly where that area made sense and how the density, goals would be met, and factoring in, different parcels around town and hearing from different neighborhoods around town. And arriving at that decision was a long and painstaking process. And I think anyone who sat through that process, and I would include town meeting in that, who came back, in however many years and found out that we just converted one because someone wanted a single family house on Main Street would be thoroughly irritated by that. And I think the development that created the ledges was created to create a certain amount of density, and it was thoughtful about which land was included. And as I've mentioned before, I assume that they left that parcel unbuilt, one, because it's tricky to build, but also because it's a buffer between a higher density area and a lower density. So I think, and the ledges is lovely. Nothing against the petitioner, nothing against the residents. I wish town meeting could weigh in because we don't have a representative that represents them, and it would be nice to hear from them. But we haven't heard anyone come out passionately in favor of it. That would make me think this is an example where we should violate the intention of an overlay district. I thought a lot about whether or not there have been other examples, what the precedent is, other times that we've done that. Certainly there were parcels along North Main that were rezoned to residential to make sure that we always debate the word character on the planning board, but the size and scope and scale of the neighborhood stayed intact. And I think those were thoughtful changes that were made because there was a strong movement on the part of the residents. And I just don't hear that coming forward. I hear an owner of a development asking for some sort of favor in terms of a financial advantage to his parcel, and no shade on that. That's a very real situation. You've made a great case for it, but I'm just not moved to make this change for the development.
Thank you, Carrie. Other members of the board with questions, comments? I have some comments, but I can save them for last, or I can seeing neither Nick nor John seem to have any questions or comments. I have 3 points that I would make. I really wanted to go last, so hopefully you're not just waiting me out. I think I sort of see this proposal similar to the way Carrie says it. I feel like the common area and open space from the decision 40 years ago was a feature, not a bug. It was designed to be there, to be buffer between the development and the adjacent housing. So I'm very hesitant to say that when it was designed to have 110 units with a certain amount of open area, that we then start taking away some of that open area. That makes me uncomfortable. The second point I would make, which is also similar to one that Carrie made, is I'm uncomfortable rezoning an individual lot for private, not public good. This would ultimately be because the owner wants to use the land differently, which isn't the common practice or even a best practice of how we should move forward. Somebody wants to use their land differently, so we rezone it so they can use it differently. Typically, if somebody wants to do something that's not allowed per zoning on their land, they try to seek a variance. Obviously, that's unlikely to be allowed, but that's sort of the avenue that we typically would go down, so it makes me uncomfortable. And lastly, as I sort of said in my opening comments, I really don't think we should be gatekeepers to this project. as I mentioned before, we have statutory obligations under Mass General Law, which we would have done in November 24. We would have voted on this on its merits. So I want to vote on the merits. And based on those merits, I have a hard time supporting this. If the only reason I was voting for it was to bring it forward to town meeting, that would be an awkward vote for me to say, vote yes, but say I don't support it at the same time. I obviously, as chair, will bring forward to town meeting whatever the board votes, but it just would be an awkward situation for me. So that's where I stand on this, and I will return to John, Nick, Carrie, if you have any additional comments that you'd like to make.
My only comment would be that I'm really bothered by the fact that we will just keep revisiting this every 6 months ad nauseum. And I think it will be important for us. If I guess either way, it will benefit us to do a written opinion or a memo or something that sort of sticks to this project, so that we either don't take it up again until there's a significant change in the ask, or so that the spirit of this discussion is captured, so that if it is 18 months from now and we've replaced board members, and I want to say it was Pamela's comment, we want to note the history, because we've put a considerable amount of time into this.
Thank you. Out of deference, Rich, I will actually give you another chance to speak, even though we're sort of moved on to our board discussion, but I don't want you to feel like you can't respond. So I'll let you respond, and then if there's no other questions or comments from the board, I would welcome a motion or no motion, whatever the board wants to do, I would welcome. But Rich, please do go ahead.
I just have a quick question. Is it, if we vote on it and we vote it down, does the clock start again? And then if that is the case, then would it be worse for the proponent for us to take a vote and to deny it?
So I think Jay opined on that question before, but I'll let, I mean, part of that's an opinion, like what would be best for the proponent, which I think Jay can't answer. But as far as what happens if we vote no, I think, Jay, if you could just repeat what you said before, just so I'm not misquoting you.
Yeah, I mean, and I understand and appreciate the question that the applicant would save themselves 6 months if you voted unfavorable. So my opinion is, if town meeting is deprived of taking either positive or negative action because you voted negatively, then I don't think that's a restarting of the clock. If you voted favorably to send it to town meeting, then the clock would restart.
Okay.
Yeah, we turn to questions from the board before I give Rich an opportunity to speak. Seeing none, Rich, I will give you an opportunity to respond if you'd like, and then move back to the board for any motions that the board may have.
We're dealing with a 40-year-old document, and the 40-year-old document is one that is working for both sides. And so if we're working with the spirit of this 40-year-old document, we have 56.375 acres. The density of a PRD is 55 acres for 110 units. We're seeking to give permission to separate 20,000 square feet. We're providing 23,000 square feet additional to the conservation restriction. We are willing to pay a mitigation fee, and instead, we are just interested in selling a piece of property, and in the best interests of the town to sell it at the highest price. And so therefore you would get the highest mitigation fee based on a percentage of the sale. That's all I have to say. I hope you guys will consider and think about this. We're not setting a precedent. This is the only piece of property that the Ledges could possibly offer up to sell. And there's no other PRD in town that has any property that could possibly be sold.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work you put into this. And I welcome a motion from the board if anyone is so inclined to make one.
I'm gonna get the article number wrong, but I move to recommend unfavorable action on Article 6. Is it 6?
Article 6 is the zoning article, correct? Article 5 is the one that separates the parcel from the ledges. So Article 6. Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Any desire to have additional discussion on the motion for unfavorable action on Article 6 that's been moved and seconded? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Carrie,
Aye.
Nick,
I'm going to vote nay.
John,
Aye.
I vote aye as well. That makes the vote 3-1 in favor of unfavorable action on Article 6. I will ask, because we are, so I've been told by Jay, we are free to opine on Article 5 as well. If anybody wants to make a motion on that, but we are not compelled to do so. I just wanted to give the opportunity if anybody wants to do so, because I don't want to. Seeing none.
I'm staying out of it.
Seeing none, I will thank you, Rich. Thank you, Jay. I will write a memo to town meeting moderator with the result of our vote, and then I will also present that result in our town meeting presentation on the first night of town meeting, Article 3. So with that, I believe we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a continuation of the public hearing on 10 Converse. So this is a continuation of the public hearing. Tonight, we're considering potential modifications to the design approved by the special permit in 2022. I just want to say, for the audience's clarity, we are not here to revisit the approved permit, but rather to consider proposed changes. Those proposed changes include, among other things, the overall height, number of floors, the amount and location of parking, the amount and location of commercial space, number of residential units, configuration of the work-live units, and the rainwater retention system. If we as a board conclude that these changes are significant, we could ask for additional review or resubmission as a new project. If we find these changes are not significant, we could approve revisions to the 2022 special permit. Lastly, I want to just state that the elephant in the room is that there are outstanding issues with both the DEP and the Conservation Commission that are yet to be settled regarding the 2022 approved design. And they might apply to the revised design that's before us now. However, these issues are ostensibly beyond our purview and still must be addressed by other bodies in town and at the state level. So much like the first public hearing, I'd like to give up to 3 minutes to the petitioners to say hello, update anything they have to say, then move on to questions and comments from the audience, again, limiting those to 3 minutes from the audience. I will point out that public comment submitted in writing will be available before the next, the plan is to continue this public hearing till May 6th, and public comment that has been submitted in writing will be available in the packet prior to the May 6th meeting. We'll then have discussions and questions from the board after that time. So with that, I see that Paul is here and you are unmuted. I would welcome you to tell us. I doubt anything has changed, but I certainly don't want you to not be able to start off and say hello to us all. So welcome.
Terrific. Thank you so much. It's great to be with you all tonight. I'm Paul Onyebane of Urban Spaces, and I'm joining you from our Cambridge office. Really, only a few things have sort of changed over the last time we met on April 1st. One was that we had a number of people ask us or comment about the project, and it appeared that they maybe were sort of one meeting behind, understandably. So I just wanted to ensure that maybe everyone could hear some of the modifications that were made from one presentation to the other. So specifically, there were concerns that all the parking that was underground was removed, and now the parking was going to be at grade only. There will, in fact, be parking underground. In fact, the majority of the parking will be underground, although some will be at grade as proposed. Similarly, there were concerns that there were no sort of alternative style units along the plan east side of the building on the grade level. And in fact, we did restore those from the March 4th to the April 1st meeting. There was also concern that the retail was all gone from the first floor, and we did react to requests to put it back, and we did so. So there is in fact retail both at the north facing and the south facing side of the building, albeit a little smaller than originally planned. So moreover, we're trying our best to balance the original proposed, the original approved drawings and with today's needs. As we have discussed several years later, the project hasn't gotten off the ground for a reason. And in part, it's because we felt that some of the design elements, including the underground parking and the other things that we're asking to be modified, were not going to make the project successful. So we're trying to ensure that the building sort of doesn't go into foreclosure with the bank, which is somewhat imminent. And that's why we have some level of urgency and appreciate the board's, continuing to hear us meeting after meeting. Last comment would be just to point out, our request, of course, is for administrative review, as opposed to the other options that the chair mentioned. We feel, obviously, in our opinion, that the changes that we're requesting are not substantial enough to rise to the cause of needing a special permit amendment or certainly a resubmission. We hope you'll agree. And just to put a point on it, we did try again to note that, the building height, we've requested a 6-foot increase. We didn't, request a full story or a 10 or a 15-foot increase or more because we were trying to keep under the 10% threshold, which some might see as a high watermark for making a substantial change. The building will be experienced as a 58-foot building because of the setback. Although 68 feet in height as proposed, it will feel more like 58 feet. And in fact, that is less than the current building, which is there at 62 feet straight up. Similarly, the unit count. We tried to be mindful and respectful of the original approval, not increasing by more than 10%. So we're proposing perhaps to go from 43 to up to 47 units. That does have the added benefit of having an additional affordable contributed to the town pool. So we'll have, instead of 6 affordables, we'll have 7. And the parking, we think parking is very important to have off-street. I know many neighbors and others competing for street spaces feel the same way. We did want to note that the parking was approved with 56 spaces. I think we maybe accidentally said 59 at one point, but it was approved with 56. And now our proposal, we were actually able to, even since last time we met, squeeze in 3 more tandem spaces. So we have 53 spaces, a reduction of less than 10%, and still ample to have at least one parking space per residential unit. So moreover, those are the changes, and we really appreciate the board hearing us out again, and look forward to hopefully getting your administrative approval in May. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you for waiting through the other public hearing. I would open up now to public comment. If anybody has any comments or questions from the public, they could raise their digital hands. I will then call on you in the order in which you raise your hand to the best of my ability and ask you to state your name, address, and then try to limit your comments to 3 minutes as best you can. When we get to the end of that, we'll close the public comment session and move to the board. So with that, I see Jamie Duvall has raised their hand. If you could unmute yourself, state your name and address, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Jamie Duvall. I am chair of the Design Review Committee. And just this week, we looked at the project, thinking about the question at hand: is this a new project compared to what was proposed 2 or 3 years ago? And the vote was 7-0 unanimous that yes, it's a new project. And I'll just quickly go through a few reasons why we think it's a new project, and also mention that we have 3 architects: a landscape architect, a historian, and other qualified people looking at the building. So in terms of the main points, obviously an additional floor has been added. Granted, it's 6 feet, but it is an additional floor. And it raises the building from 5 stories to 6 stories. And there are repercussions, which I will get to later in my list. And then there's private parking garage on the ground level, which we didn't have with the first iteration. And that also has many repercussions. The commercial space on the ground level is substantially smaller than it was the first time. It's reduced by over 2/3 due to the parking garage, which affects Mount Vernon Street and the pond frontage. And there's quite a bit of concern that it's pretty much a dead building with just private space on the ground floor. The live-work units that were put back in are very small, and they only have 1 door to the outside. They don't have a second door to an indoor corridor because they back up to the parking garage and the parking garage ramp. The parking garage is very different and relies on a ramp that's one way, but they'll have a traffic light. They're really squeezing the parking in, and it has taken over a lot of the ground floor. In terms of the added building height, it's taller and more massive. And the way I read the massing is that even though the 6th floor, they said, is set back more than the top floor of the original scheme, the 5th floor, which was the top floor, now largely extends to the edge of the building. So it's part of the brick mass. And that's quite different. Overall, the building proportions have changed because it's 6 floors instead of 5. The ground floor is 3 feet shorter, making it feel, private and parking garage-like, and not a tall, vibrant retail commercial area. And then each story above that, I think, is about a foot shorter than the original building. So in terms of what it looks like in terms of proportions, it's quite different. Window changes are significant because of this. Facing Town Hall, there were broad windows, quite generous, and now there's just narrow, small windows facing Town Hall. So the windows have changed. And then smaller items, the transformer room was down Converse Place. Now it's up near the corner of Mount Vernon with metal doors. It will have metal doors, bollards, and signage, and we don't think that would be too attractive for Mount Vernon Street. The residential lobby is clearly not worked out because it's a it's a lower floor-to-floor height, but they seem to have multi-story residential lobby, which is not shown in plan. The garage entry has moved to the south, closer to the pond. That's a difference. and that doesn't show up on the elevations. The drawings are pretty much not coordinated too well. The elevator location has moved. And again, this is not
Amy,
reflected.
first of
Yeah.
all, I'm not going to cut you off. You're at 4 minutes. If you could, just so that.
Oh,
we
yeah, no,
I
those
don't
are
wanna cut
very
anybody
small.
off, but I also want to be respectful of everybody else.
Oh, thank you so much. Basically, the submitted design is incomplete, so it's, and not coordinated. And the FAR isn't provided, and it's greater than 3 now for sure. And we are very concerned about the village character. But in terms of the question at hand, yes, it's a different building. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I don't want to cut anybody off, but I also want to be respectful of the committee and everybody. With that, I would move on to Maureen Dorr. I hope I got your last name pronounced correctly. If you state your name and address for the committee, and then you have up to 3 minutes.
Sure. Hello, I'm Maureen Dorr. I live at 51 Pond Street here in Winchester. And I just wanted to weigh in. I'm a very long-term resident and a business owner here in town. I actually bought my first home in the 80s and then moved into my current home in 1996. I've also rented 3 different offices and been in Winchester with my business for the last 25 years. So needless to say, I really love it here. And I'm getting to a certain age that I hate to admit, but I'd love to stay here. I'm starting to not be able to afford the landscapers and all of the maintenance that I have to put into my house, even though I love it. So hearing about this project, I just got very excited about it because I started to look around for places to, move into, and I honestly don't want to leave town, but there's nothing available that, excuse me, is maintenance free. And the fact that this would be in the center of town, walking to all the shops, I could spend more money on clothes than I do on landscaping. And I just would absolutely love to have this kind of an opportunity. I really have been looking. I don't see anything remotely similar. And so I think those of us who are long-term lovers of Winchester, it would be nice for the town to consider us and think about whether people who don't want to leave the town would have an actual place that you could go. So I have worked with the folks at Urban Spaces on a couple of projects, and I can vouch for the quality of their work. I sit in meetings where they agonize over the details and really worry about the impact that things will have on the community. And they really, from what I can see, it's painstaking. And I'm also a board member of the Friends of Winter, excuse me, Friends of Winter Pond Committee, so I know how important it is to conserve these wonderful resources that we have. The pond is why I can never see myself leaving here. So if I could move from one pond to another pond, I would be thrilled and delighted. And I just know the health of the pond is so important, and we kill ourselves trying to fundraise all the time and make sure that we're, treating the invasive species and all of the things that go along with that. And I know I see that there is some support that will be coming to Mill Pond. And so I think that's also wonderful. And this is a little bit mean to say, but I think that we would be turning an eyesore in that from the building that's there now into something that really feels contextual with the rest of our beautiful downtown. And I sign out with that.
Thank you very much. And you were exactly 3 minutes on the dot. So thank you very much.
I didn't put a timer on myself either.
Well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, I will move on to Julie Broderick, who I believe was next. Julie, if you could unmute yourself and state your name and address. And you have, like I said, 3 minutes, but I'm trying not to cut people off, but do our best.
Hi, thank you very much, Brian. My name is Julie Broderick. I live at 7 Kendall Street in the neighborhood behind St. Mary's. And I am on the Winchester Historical Commission. I would like to also mention that the Winchester Historical Commission in our meeting the other night felt that this was a new project, that there were significant enough changes from the previously approved project that this should constitute a new a new project. And I'm not going to repeat everything that Jamie said because the Historical Commission had very much the same concerns as the Design Review Board. I would just add a couple of additional points. One is that, Winchester's town center, is a very charming, lovely, small town place, and it has a very human scale. And I think one of the biggest concerns we had as a historical commission is that this building is very, very large and very tall, and that huge mass will completely overwhelm our historic downtown, and that it will no longer have that human scale that it currently has. We also have a lot of concerns around the impact on the pond. We've been made aware that the Mill Pond area and the river are in and of themselves historic resources. They were redeveloped in the early 1900s from an industrial site to the beautiful open space that we have now. And our feeling as a commission, and my personal feeling, is that this very large building will really have a huge detriment to the feel of our historic downtown. So I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, and under 3 minutes as well. Appreciate it. I see we have 4 more hands raised. I'd like to be able to get through those 4 hands and then move on to discussion by the board. I believe the order was, I apologize for messing up names. Nabil Ibrahim, if you could state your name and address for the committee, and try to again limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you are unable to.
Yes, can you hear us?
Yes, now I can hear you. Yes. Yeah, perfect.
Hi, my name is Evelyn Ibrahim, and then my husband, Dr. Ibrahim. So we are going to speak from the point of view of tenants of 10 Converse Place. My husband owns a dental practice in town on the first floor of that building. There's another dentist at the last floor of that building. First and foremost, this is obviously something that would impact us tremendously. And we always feel like we're the last ones to know when anything's happening. Moving a dental office is not something you do and you just don't pick up your stuff and go. It would require a minimum of 6 to 9 months and a new investment of a minimum of $500,000. Because we've looked, it's been 7 years, we've been without a lease. And we've been unable to do any kind of modifications. And for us, really, at this point, at the age of 63, thinking of retirement, we've been in this limbo for 7 years. Nobody would buy his practice without a lease. And we just ask you to, we were so surprised. We got a letter last year from the bank saying that we followed every single step of this, and we don't understand why this is back on the table. It makes no sense to us. As you said at the start, this is something that anyways will encounter other issues. It was blocked by conservation and other things. So we're just like thinking, is this going to be another 3, 4, 5 years of nothing? So we would just urge you to, make a decision and think of, even though there's not many of us in that building, it's still our life work, and it's very important to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comment and perspective. I would move on to, I guess, Ellen Spencer would be next. If you could state your name and address for the committee, and again, 3 minutes.
Yes, it will be less than that. Yes, Ellen Spencer, 10 Warren Street. I am also a member of the Design Review Committee. I was chair before Jamie for the previous 2 years. And I just wanted to state that this is kind of in reaction to Maureen Dorr. The DRC is not, we support housing downtown. We we understand that there is a need for more more housing. It's just the size and mass of this project that initially we opposed, and we want to see something go in there which has both first floor retail and a reasonable, for the context of the space, amount of units. I just wanted to point that out, but I think that for all the reasons Jamie cited, this is just not the same project, and it's inferior in many ways. And also, I would say, I don't think I see no hardship in having to file again to get the right project for this small village. So, but again, just this one is, and our minutes will be, our draft minutes just came out today. Our minutes from our meeting should be available to you very, very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and definitely under 3 minutes. Appreciate your perspective. We have 2 more hands raised, and I'm going to take those last 2 hands. I think in the order I got them, I think we had Maura Sullivan first. You could state your name and address again for the committee. And then I'll lastly move on to Michelle McCarthy when we're done. So thank you, Maura.
Maura Sullivan again, 28 Stone Ave. I'll be quick because I already submitted my written comment to you, public comment in writing. I do agree, obviously, that it's a new project for the reasons that everybody has pointed out. My question is a technical one on Section 5 of the permit from 2022, said it was contingent or conditional upon an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission. But since that has not been given, I wasn't sure that the 2022 permit could even go forward at this point, since that order of conditions was not given. And I just want to again point out that we do have a proceeding before the DEP and also in land court, and those have not been resolved yet. So that does impact the planning board's decision making. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will set aside your question for our discussion, and we'll circle back to that when we get there. I hope that's okay. And I will move on to our last public comment, which would be from Michelle McCarthy. You hopefully know the drill by now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. This is Michelle McCarthy. I grew up around here, but I've lived on Oxford Street for 15 years. I am a town meeting member. I've been on the Historic Commission for about 15 years. I also served on the ZRAC Commission, which was involved with bringing more housing to our downtown. So I did really like to hear from the other resident who's looking for more housing. I think about it myself as I'm getting older. Where am I going to live in a few years? I have elderly parents in town who also had a challenge looking for new housing. They now live at the Mystic School, another historic building that was renovated on Church Street. And I wish we had more of those, to be honest. I'm speaking out against this project. I must admit, and to the folks at Urban Spaces and to anyone listening, I see designs all the time for 15 years at the Historic Commission and being very involved in town. I actually love the design. I think the architect did a beautiful job. So I in no way am trying to criticize their work, because I have to say I see a lot of bad things and a lot of bad designs. And this one was beautiful. It's just too big. It is, when you look at all the mechanics on top, we're talking 80 feet. Everyone I've talked to, from my children who typically love everything beautiful and modern, everyone says it's just so big. It's too tall, it's too wide, there's no more green space. Something I have to point out to the folks on the planning board, we are very blessed to live in a beautiful historic town. Not every town center is like Winchester Center. Winchester Center is on the National Register Historic District. The Mill Pond Park, this whole beautiful park that was created, is on the National Historic Register District. And to put up this huge building is just, I think it's going to have a really negative impact on our historic downtown. I wish we could find another location for this building. I wish they could maybe redesign it and just have some more green space. make it not as tall, make it not as wide. I hope that they can do that because of course people would love, more housing, but I think that it's just too alarming. As my fellow commission member said, the Historic Commission did unanimously vote that this was a substantial new design, and that was just the fact that it adds height, adds the parking on the ground, as other folks have said. But I really do ask the planning board to please, think about our historic town center and think about the negative impact on the park and the pond. And I really thank the developers for working on this, but I hope that we can, come up with a better design for our downtown. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to chat and for everyone's hard work on this. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your perspective, and 2 minutes, 55 seconds. Thank you. And with that, I will close the public comment question portion of the public hearing, and time for discussion by the board. Anybody has anything they want to ask, anything they want to say? I'm expecting that we're going to continue this public hearing until May 6th, as I said. So you might still be just taking in information or want to get answers to questions. We can get them tonight. Carrie.
So again, I could talk for days, but I
won't time you. You get to go as long as you want.
This is like that one parcel that brings like the whole family together, right? I keep saying that, like all of not maybe the schools, but the select board, the conservation commission come together here. So I don't think that we can make this. You sort of suggested this is something that we decide as a planning board, and it is, but I think the context of this parcel is really important. I remember that I didn't pull the map out. I meant to pull the map out. So the Wetlands Protection Act, the spirit of it was to protect the wetlands, because as mentioned, this is one of many industrial areas that was built on waterfronts. And the spirit of it is to correct the trend of encroaching on natural habitat and doing damage to our waterways. And so the Wetlands Protection Act has an absolute no build zone 25 feet from the waterfront, and really tries to control construction, at least with careful construction, if not with limited construction, within the 100-foot buffer. And this entire parcel is there may be a corner of it that's outside of it, but most of this entire parcel is within the 100-foot buffer. And I want to say the building is at like 27 feet. Like it's very, very close to the 25-foot buffer. And in terms of Maura's question, when the DEP took over for the decision of the issues that are in front of it, the DEP will issue a superseding order of conditions, and that will be what governs the parcel from the environmental perspective. So Conservation Commission's a little outside of it in terms of the order of conditions, and we do have to wait for that. But I don't want us to lose sight of how much building we're putting on the waterfront and how much we'll be changing the green space around it and the opportunity for the town to interact with that waterway. It took a very long concerted effort to restore the herring run. It's like, poor Taylor's heard this from me like 12 times. Like, it's my favorite 3-stage migration in town. We get the herring come back, and then the night herons, those frumpy little penguin birds come, and then they're followed by the 3rd stage, the congregation of nature photographers on the bridge. Like, it's just this really wonderful town event that we should keep access to. But before I go too far down into those weeds, I do think that I am concerned about the fact that the new design hasn't been submitted to DEP, so they are not making their decision based on the current design. I think that's because it's in flux, but I don't know if that won't delay the project a bit longer. We should get that answer soon, and we should get that answer probably from Elaine Vreeland or our contact at DEP, so that the applicants know whether or not that changes anything. But we should be working with the Conservation Commission on this one. And then I think as a town, somebody brought this up last week. It's sort of a jewel of a location. So I think this is the time for us to get very proactive and very creative about opportunities to either collaborate with the applicant or to look at opportunities, in any way possible to keep control over the first floor and keep the second piece of legislation is about the sight lines from Mount Vernon Street to the waterway. And if we have apartments that are 300 and, most of the distance around the building will become private spaces, and we will have no transparency opportunities. We won't have a commercial space that spans a corner, which I think the original design had. There'll be no opportunity to sort of see through any inch of that parcel to the waterway. And that's something that we want to think about. Is there an opportunity to keep any interaction with the town from that first floor? I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Carrie. I will confess I'm a little confused about some of the issues that are sort of beyond our purview, talking about the DEP and the Conservation Commission. Those are sort of beyond our purview. Someone else has to worry about them, and nothing. My understanding is, regardless of how we decide on this, those still have to move forward in their own molasses way through both land court, I believe, and with the DEP. Is that your understanding too, Karen?
You're reading the letter of the law. You're correct in that DEP will issue a superseding order of conditions for the plans that they have. Those will have to be met in terms of project development, mitigation, all of those things, and we will decide the zoning. But I don't think that precludes us from considering the spirit of the Wetlands Protection Act, which is that encroachment on the waterways compromises the integrity of the waterways. Did this building get too big to be on a waterfront? I think that's a question that the Conservation Commission was really wrestling with when we were handed the plans by the planning board, having not sort of been part of their discussion.
Thank you. No, that's a good perspective. Do other members of the committee have anything they'd like to add, or any questions?
I mean, my, I guess conversations with constituents have kind of echoed what we've heard tonight in terms of the building, being just very massive. It's very high and wide. But I guess I'm just trying to get as much perspective as possible from the hearing.
That's very helpful. I appreciate that, Nick. John?
I mean, the question, as I understand it, that we're eventually going to vote on is a substantial change. As I was not on the board when this was approved, and I know that it took many meetings and it was a very long process, but two of the really critical issues were the building height and where the parking was going to go. And now the building has added a story, and there's parking on the first floor. So, that's not changing the hardware on the doors. These were central issues. After they, got to the point where they realized there was going to be a zero setback on Mount Vernon. And of course, there are plenty of issues with Concom and the water, yes, but for the part that the planning board, is my understanding, is concerned with, it was the height, parking, and we've crossed two lines here. It's going to be a whole lot higher, and no indication of how high the mechanicals are going to be. No indication at all what's happening with the mechanicals above the new 6th floor. And we'll be parking on grade, which, I'm not saying you can't have that. I'm just saying that it was a big issue, and the original applicant had resolved it so that there was no parking on grade. And, it's difficult to so those are significant. Despite all the other things, those are kind of central issues, and adding a floor. Anyway.
Very helpful. Thank you. And I agree too. what our central issue is in this public hearing is whether these changes are significant. And that's something that we have to decide. As I said, the height has changed, the number of floors has changed, the location and amount of parking has changed. The amount and location of commercial space, the number of residential units, the configuration of the work live units, and the rainwater retention system. Some of them have changed significantly, as you just mentioned, John. Some of them have changed in small ways, but a number of things have changed in a number of small ways, and several things have changed in significant ways. So I think we have a work cut out for us to decide how to move forward on this.
I could envision a discussion, where you talk about, we could talk about something, maybe a different plan, but has it changed substantially? I think if the board, if the regional applicant could have gotten 6 floors, they would have approved, it would have asked, as I recall, asked for it, and that wasn't going to work. And wanted to park on grade, I think, in the early stages, and that proved unpopular. So these were, I think if you were to go back to the board that approved it, I think they would say, geez, parking and building height and floor count, those are significant issues for us. It was clear, this isn't new information. So
thanks. Carrie?
I think it would be helpful for us in terms of decision making to have some really clear guidelines on what we can do. So we could approve it as, it could be built as permitted, which I think the applicant has said is not possible. And then in terms of whether or not there's significant changes, I think it would be helpful if we were very clear on what we're allowed to do under each of those pathways and what the burden on the applicant is and what the timeline, the timeline's on hold until DEP has their work completed in the other cases is wrapped up. But in terms of the planning board's process, can we get new peer review studies? Are we going to hear from engineering again? What are we allowed to do under just adjusting what information are we allowed to gather under adjusting I'm blanking on the word, kind of the rules and regs for the project as permitted versus a fresh application?
Excuse me, Karen. I'm actually a little confused because I was not part of that. Do they have a building permit or do they just have approval?
Taylor, do you know?
I would turn that over to Taylor because I think actually I would love.
They have an approved project,
but they don't have a building permit.
You can't pick up the building permit until the DEP finishes.
Right. They don't have a permit. They haven't. We don't have.
They have a legally binding decision from the planning board saying that.
Right.
Yeah,
they don't have a permit. They can't stick a shovel in the ground tomorrow.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a.
So
sorry,
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, they just essentially, well, they have environmental issues, but so far as the planning board is concerned, they could move forward with permitting construction.
So Taylor, a couple of things that Carrie said there that might be helpful to sort of get in order before our next meeting is sort of a number of points that Carrie made about sort of timeline and whether, regardless of how we look, even if we were to say that this is not substantially different, there still would probably need to be engineering review because there are some changes with rainwater retention, I believe, unless that has changed again. So I don't know. I think that understanding some of that before we make a decision at our next meeting might be helpful. I don't know. Carrie, I think you had a number of points, and I'm trying to remember them all. But I feel like if we could have those sort of have something ready so that we understand the answers to your questions, 'cause I think they were good questions before we make a decision on May 6th, of how to move forward and what our options are. So with that, I see, Paul, that you've raised your hand again. I would like to give you an opportunity. I think that we give you an opportunity to speak, and then after that, I would welcome a motion to continue. After that, I would welcome an motion to continue the public hearing to our next regularly scheduled meeting, which is on May 6th. We do have a special meeting for town meeting, but those will be in small rooms at town hall. Excuse me, at high school. So, Paul, go ahead. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate all the comments and are mindful and respectful of everyone's varied opinions. We are in a little bit of a challenging place ourselves because we would love to just take the project that was approved and then, really none of this discussion would be happening tonight. But the reality is we think the project will not be successful. If we don't have enough parking, then we have complaints that there's not enough parking and there'll be people crowding the streets. And then, of course, buyers won't be interested because people generally like to have cars. So we tried to carefully weigh that by saying we understand we're going to be putting some parking now at grade, which is very commonplace in many projects, but obviously a little unpopular for some people in this project. So we heard the discussion and we tried to restore and wrap around the retail and wrap around the residential. So we are trying to be receptive to comments, and even the comments that were made tonight. We would be very pleased to relook at some of the building designs. Maybe we should pull the 5th floor in too, in order to address an earlier comment about the setback of the building. We are planning to put in double height spaces for retail and lobby, so they don't feel crunched. We are holding to a 9-foot standard, which is, it used to be 7'6", then it was 8, then it was 8'6" in the industry. Now it's 9 feet, very tall ceilings, so people can enjoy the space. So like you, we're trying to weigh, all the issues and to try to package them up in a way that works. In this case, we've tried to strike the right balance, and we could continue to work in the context of having an approval. The concern that we have the most is that one person said, what's the detriment? What's the hardship if, this had to go back for full review? Well, it's really a matter of circumstance. The last developer who we're trying to take over from, as many people know, is going through bankruptcy. The project doesn't work, and therefore, if the project doesn't work, and we don't get approval in a timely way, then, what the pressure on us is foreclosure from the bank. So we don't own the property. It's not our foreclosure, but someone else is going to come through. And then all of the productive discussion that we're having tonight and in the past meetings will really be for naught, because someone, we understand, will likely come through knowing that there's no reasonable path to permitting, and the existing building that's permitted isn't going to work. They're going to go for a 40B, and then we'll lose control of the height, the conservation issues, the architectural issues. The building will become taller, and no one probably really, can, do all that much about it over time. So we would love to not see that happen. Obviously, we'd love to do the project. We have our own self-interest to do that. I also think, though, it's better for the town. So we are staying within the existing footprint of the building. That's primarily what, usually people think of. Now, yes, we're changing some of the components within the footprint, as we've all described. And yes, we're going a little taller, 6 feet, but we really tried to keep it under the threshold so you could, with good conscience, call it, an administrative, not substantial approval. So with that, just make those closing remarks, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate that. I would welcome a motion to continue the public hearing to May 6th.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Roll call, Nick,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Carrie,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. Thank you everyone for all your comments. And just a reminder, you can send us emails at it's planningboard@winchester.us if you have any additional feedback. We're now going to continue on with the rest of our regularly scheduled meeting. I just need to pull up the agenda, which is over here. With permission of the board, I'd like to take something out of order. I know we have Hilda Wong from Arts Winchester, who is, and the rest of our business is all internal. I would like to welcome her to the table. If I think I saw her, there she is. If you, we had sat down a couple of months ago and talked about some of the ways that we could potentially collaborate. And at the end of that meeting, I said, the best thing to do is, why don't you come before the board, introduce yourself. I'm sure many people on the board know you already. And we can talk a little bit about how we can do some collaborations moving forward. I know you sent a presentation to us, and hopefully you can present it on here. And if not, we can work to get it presented. And welcome. Thank you for coming, and thank you. Sorry for the delay. I know I told you after 8, and this is actually after 8, so I was right.
It was very interesting to sit through that, and I, as a longtime resident, I've been here since 1990. I thank you all for the effort. I know that most of you, if not all of you, have full-time jobs, and so this is a very long night, and I was watching the clock trying to figure out, do you want me to keep going, or do you guys need a break, and or should I come back? But all right.
We welcome you tonight. This is a long deferred invitation, so I'm glad you could make it tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. Actually, I have not presented to this board in a while, and I think a number of the folks here have changed at this point. So let me do a quick intro. My name is Hilda Wong-Du. As I mentioned, I've been here for a really long time. I retired about probably about 3 years ago, just about. And I'm involved in the board at the Historical Society, as well as the Network for Social Justice. And after Mary McKenna had done all the good work along with Joyce Westner of getting the cultural district up and running, right when I was retiring, Mary moved out of town and said, "You take over." And I'm like, great. So here I am. And I'll talk a little bit about just a little bit more information. When Brian and I met, he had mentioned that there was a lot of questions around, what's the difference between the cultural district and the cultural council, and that continual confusion is there. So what I'm going to try to do is run through these slides in 15 minutes and give us some time to have a conversation. By all means, do not hesitate to ask some questions throughout. Okay, so first things first, what's the difference between the Cultural Council and the Cultural District? The Cultural Council is a funding organization. All 351 cities and towns in Winchester get it, and it is the way that the Mass Cultural Council distributes arts and cultural funding to all its cities and towns. So the Cultural District differently is something that towns and cities, and in some cases neighborhoods, and such as Boston, which has multiple cultural districts, actually go to Mass Cultural Council and go through this really long involved process and say, hey, we have a concentration of cultural assets and we think that people would want to come and visit. So the purpose is economic development. It is that the arts and cultural industry is an economic driver in and of itself, in that it employs many people, but it also attracts So many people will go to a theater or a musical presentation and then go for dinner and do some shopping. So there is a component around that's really the main focus there. In both cases, Mass Cultural Council gives us an annual allotment of money. So the Cultural Council gets 7,900 this past year, and the all cultural districts get $15,000 a year as to help us support the local cultural assets here. There are only 58. 3 were designated last year. This program's been in place since I think we just hit, I think we're 11 years. So it's something that's hasn't been as long in the Massachusetts budget. Any questions on that? Now, organizationally, importantly, the Cultural Council is appointed by the Select Board. The Cultural Council, the Mass Cultural Council doesn't define how the cultural districts can be managed. In some cases, they're employees of the city or town. In other cases, they are independent nonprofits or a combination of the both. Here in Winchester, we started off as a fiscally sponsored by the Griffin Museum, and last year we had turned into an independent 501c3, and we renamed ourselves Arts Winchester to try to bring some distinction. So this runs into a little bit of history of what has happened at the cultural district since its inception. It got approved right in time for COVID. So in December of 19, they got the approval, and that summer in 2020, they put out the first Photoville exhibit. And that's really where I found it. I was stuck in the house for all that time, and it was really lovely to be out and seeing these pieces that were open and free to everybody in town. And I wanted to be part of it. So that's how I volunteered. And in 2021, as it started to get more established, they grew. We added some performances on the Griffin Terrace. The building banners got introduced in 2021. And then we got to 2022. And this is when Marion Joyce stepped back and I took on as chair. And by that point in time, we were coming out of COVID. And a lot of the things, such as the collaborations and the relationships with town and so forth, were things that just were hard to do during COVID and during lockdown. So the first place that we focused was working on our relationships and our collaborations with not only the cultural assets. So I think, not only the Griffin, but the music school, bookends, studio on the Common, all of these, the chamber, focusing on that, focusing on working with the town so that we had a real, a stronger relationship. For me, I worked in a combination of both staff as well as some of the elected board. We introduced the sidewalk art. We started talking about some of the future ideas around building the Riverwalk. That's when we first started talking about, wouldn't it be lovely if we could walk around downtown and we could connect the Griffin and the high school and the Jenks along to the Mill Pond area and give people a nice way to be able to stroll through town. That's really where we started to push. And importantly, while it's an economic driver, the other component that we were thinking is that we didn't really have anything other than the summer exhibits. So June came, there was all this art put out there. September came and it took it all down. And by October, there was absolutely not a stitch of artwork in town other than the War Memorial. And I think the Madeline Lord sculpture that is in front of the library. And for such a beautiful backdrop as I appreciated some of the discussions earlier about the historic downtown, wouldn't it be lovely to have sculpture? So in 2023, we finally started to introduce the concept of sculpture and with the focus of creating year-round attractions so that people are not just coming here during the summertime, but we're giving them reasons to come year round. And that's what and then we were fortunate enough in 2024 to win one of the ARPA community grants, and we were able to implement the Shore Road Park. So, so these are some of the things that I've highlighted here in bold of some of the things that we focused on. And at the same time, we got to the 501c3. Okay. Keep going. These are our mission and our goals, right? This is, if we promote the arts and culture, it'll strengthen our community, strengthen our local economy. So how do we want to do that? We want to make sure that somebody's focused on the outdoor art. That is not a priority for anybody prior to us. We want to foster the creativity of all our audiences. You know, the introduction of augmented reality last year was, you know, could we excite a young person to get involved and really use that creativity to turn into something else? Developing the Riverwalk. Let's build out the place and let's give people a way and an area that they could walk. One of the main tourist attractions that are in this area, when you look at it, look at like TripAdvisor, it's the Griffin, it's Right Lock Farm, and it's the Fells. Well, the Fells and the Right Lock Farm are great places, but they're not always accessible. So how about something right downtown that is much easier to navigate if you have a stroller or you have ability challenges? Let's create something that's a little bit more local and that you can find places to eat and shop and or frequent the downtown at the same time. We needed to put together a lot of that before we started to really do a lot of advertising. So now we're starting to focus on increasing awareness outside of Winchester. First, it was is really getting people to understand and educating people about what the cultural district is beyond the signs. And then now it's really about come here, and we've got some great restaurants and great new shops that have been coming in. So and then the last one is really focusing on our collaborations. And you know, I think of Arts Winchester as being something that it is a bit of an opportunity to use as glue. I think that as somebody who in my professional experience was a technologist and a product owner, creativity and that type of bringing in different points of view is really helpful to pulling us out of the box. And I think that there's some real interesting ways that we can solve problems using creativity or just having that point of view in town. These are some of the things that we have planned this year. If you haven't seen it already, we just installed a third piece of art at the park in March, vertical water. Aberjona Day is May 3rd. We try to work very closely with the Conservation Commission because the river runs straight through our cultural district, and we love the idea of having what we've called the River Walk. So we have an opening of the sculpture park planned for May, and we're inviting the whole community. Please come and you know, give us your ideas. We'll continue the summer programs between sidewalk art, town day, Griffins. We work together still with the Griffin very closely and their summer production, and we also manage the terrace series that happens on during the summertime and into the fall. We've got new sculptures planned, and we'll continue working with the chamber, both on the stroll weekend as well as the spirit weekend. And we've got an open call for a light show potentially in the November, December next winters, but we've started to really align our events so that they line up with some of the big things that are happening with the chamber. So we're collaborating from that perspective. This is us. The way this works is these are all the cultural assets on the right-hand side. This is the whole old volunteer board of directors. And the goal is to promote all of this, all of the great work that happens here. And it's important not only from the cultural assets themselves, but also the visions that you have and that the town government has for the town, in which case why the planning board is so important to us is, how do we help you solve? How do we work together? Economic development doesn't make sense as something that runs by itself as part of an independent nonprofit organization out there. That doesn't make sense to me. So I very much believe that there needs to be a partnership. We've had a draft document that an agreement that we would work. We have a draft from Jay Tallerman that we need to have an agreement with the town now that we're officially a new 501c3. How do we work together, and how does that, how do we support you, and vice versa? So I think that's all I have. So I can stop sharing, and
Thank you.
I did it fast enough.
No, you were not limited to 3 minutes.
I know I wasn't, but you guys get tired.
I'm thrilled you come tonight, and I was particularly thrilled when you said how the augmented reality is aimed toward the younger audience, because I loved it. So now I feel young, and I don't feel quite as old. Carrie, I see that face. But obviously, a lot of the work that you're doing enlivens the downtown, which is something that we're spending a lot of time trying to do on the planning board. Maybe a little slower than you, because zoning takes years for stuff to move forward, and you can. I'm sure it takes years. It feels like years to you, but for members of the town, we turn around and all of a sudden you've done a new sculpture that we didn't even know was there, and all of a sudden it's really wonderful to see. It really makes Winchester a more welcome to visit, and it sort of spirals itself. So any questions, any discussion? Anybody have anything they would like to add?
I was just going to say it's really nice to see all of the resources, the 28 member of the partnership, and all the resources that we have in this town. I mean, some of which I have experience with, but some of which I wasn't aware of, and it has been like seeing the outdoor sculpture spring up here and there, and kind of just add some really creativity and interest to the town. It's really been nice to see all that.
Great feedback. Thank you.
Carrie, fire away.
Thank you for all of this work. I, like you, was so happy to see art pop up right in the middle of the pandemic when we were just like dying for anything beautiful. And I think that we'll have opportunities as North Main gets redeveloped. We pretty intentionally left generous sidewalk spaces in the hopes that there would be opportunities for art installation. So hopefully we will, get your feedback, or invite you to review meetings, or find some practical, consistent way to apply the work that you're doing to the work that we're doing. I love it. I think it's great. Thanks for taking the time to be here.
And I have to, I meet with Taylor on a regular basis, and prior to him, Brian, and because there isn't a town curator, right? We don't have somebody who leads that, and de facto that can be us. And in the more recent example is the Starbucks mural. That was a problem that needed to be solved, and we came in to help solve that, and it's an alignment of our missions and our goals. And this is definitely this was not my career stuff, right? So it's every time we do it, we learn something new. And but the reality of it is we also have all these experts around. Like I really rely on Krista Dix as somebody who is truly as well as some of our volunteers who have experiences with museums. Cynthia Randall, who worked at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and having folks like this that help us even know where to go. Like when we were printing a mural that needed to be stuck up on a window. And so those are things that it's a resource that I want to make sure that you know that is aware, there's awareness. And I appreciate what Taylor has done in terms of I know on my to-do list that I didn't have on there is the Waterfield construction surround is something, it's a great opportunity because we have an opportunity to showcase an artist and beautify at the same time. One of the things that I need help with that I talked to Taylor about is relationship with the MBTA. The T is running straight through our cultural district. And I don't know how many of you know this, but I tried to put a mural under the Shore Road, Shore Road? Yeah, Skillings, the Skillings Road underpass. Okay. Nobody knows who owns that thing. Right. I was just going to stick a mural up there and have a community event to paint "You Are Loved" on the side of that dusty, like pigeon infested area. That would have been great to have our town participate and know that they slapped paint on that wall. So, we can still do that if I can just get through the T. I mean, I went through about, I don't know, like 15 different people. And after I understand, right? They have trains that are on fire on the tracks and people are dying. So I know that the design, painting that wall is not high on their priority. But similarly, there's a chunk of land that's owned by the DCR that's behind the library, which would be a fantastic place for another sculpture. Our perspective on sculptures is that they shouldn't be all piled up together. They should be spread out and in surprising areas. So those are just some of the areas. And then similarly, at some point in time, should we, considering the plans that you've put in, expand the cultural district up what's been called North Main Street, that gives us, there isn't any cost or anything associated but with it. However, there are things that we would need to file with the MCC.
Right. No one's mad at Banksy. We could just do that mural.
You could say you tried to call,
I left a message. What?
Yeah. I mean, you'll find out if they care.
When a lawyer has already been CC'd, I worked in the financial industry, so get a little nudgy.
One of the things that would be nice, and I know Taylor, I was talking to Taylor about this, is looking for avenues to help get funding for art in town. Funding is not my area of expertise, but I know Taylor and I were talking. There are some potential ways in the future that we might be able to find, where we overlap and where something can work. Taylor, you had mentioned something. I was wondering if you could share what you had told me about opportunity.
So we have, as of right now, actually, we have a meeting with Hilda tomorrow morning, I think.
Tomorrow morning.
About a grant opportunity called One Stop. One Stop is a very broad set of grants from the state. The particular one that we're applying for, well, we've applied to be accepted to apply, and we were granted that. So that's good first step. it's downtown improvement or downtown initiative, basically enlivening small downtowns. It's kind of perfect for what we need. Now, the stipulations of the grant are, it needs to be something that's very specific. So the grant that we're applying for will be in placemaking and wayfinding, which Hilda is the most perfect person for, as you will all find out soon as we continue to work on this. And this is just one way that the planning department can help forward this, but there are other ways that the planning board can help as well. The board there's this kind of strange intersection with the cultural, not just the cultural district, but the cultural aspect of the downtown, and then the physical aspect of the downtown. The planning board's responsible for the physical, and you're supposed to make your opinions and judgment and decisions based off of what could contribute to the cultural. But there's really kind of this disconnect on what's actually happening and what's being planned to happen 25 years from now. So as we work through more things like this one stop, it is going to be a planning department process, but we really want it to be in coordination with the planning board. We want to get the planning board's opinion. We want to understand how it reflects what you're trying to accomplish in not just downtown, but on Main Street and to the rest of the community. And the ultimate goal, I'll just be blunt about it, the ultimate goal is for the planning board to spend more of its time and budget on plans, implementation, and any other policies that can help forward this more cultural driven work, in addition to the physical work that the planning board has historically been more tied to.
Thank you, Taylor. That's super helpful. And it's always good to sort of understand where the planning department is, where the planning board is, where Arts Winchester is, and hopefully we're all sort of going in the same direction.
One question that I have is where does economic development sit? Like, I am really a novice when it comes to government, town government, and working. That I have 3 years of experience of doing that. So, does that sit within the planning department, the board? Is that something that is, or is that really at the higher level at the town manager's office?
It's really a combination. Yeah, it's really a combination of I would say it's the town manager and me most. So the town manager and the planning department, and then the select board makes a lot of opinions that influence economic development in town. I think if you were to ask them if it's a part of their what they do, they'd probably say no. But a lot of the decisions that they're making are influence the economic development. It's really it's really something that I don't think has enough attention. In most towns that have similar circumstances to Winchester, a downtown core with small local businesses and actually a quite vibrant business community, you would have a economic development coordinator at the very least. And we don't have that. I would love to have that as a part of the planning department, but that's not something that is of general interest. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. I ask because I know that it changes on a regular basis, and I'm glad that there's been some activity in that area more recently, and mostly, and it really goes back to the discussion around, the goal here is around helping the economy. So how do we do that? And that can't be done in a vacuum.
That's super helpful and good context. Any other discussion, questions, comments? Well, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for everything you do. I continue to be every time I find a new piece of artwork somewhere downtown on a regular basis that somehow I just didn't notice last time. And I'm going to start giving you credit for all of them, even if they're not being done
It's
by you.
probably, it's definitely not all, there is a whole group. And by the way, so this is the one funny thing, because I'm like learning all these things. I've hit over 10,000 views of I've put all the sculptures on Google Maps. So you can actually see them. And if you get a chance, go out there and put reviews out there and add your photos, because it certainly, again, it's kind of like trying to get people excited about coming and seeing all the stuff that's there. But I always think that's really kind of funny.
Okay, that's what I'm doing tomorrow when I get downtown. I'm putting on some reviews on Google Maps.
Awesome.
You're gonna have a whole bunch of new ones.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank
Same.
you very much.
Same. Thank you. And thank you guys for what you do, because it is late and I am wrapping up. So I think I'm within that half hour. So
No,
have
perfect.
a good night.
Perfect. Good night.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks. Nice to meet you too. See you soon. See you tomorrow, Taylor, Ian.
So with that, let's move back to item number 3, which is administration for boards and staff updates. We'll try. It's 9:15. I realize we want to be quick. I have a number of updates, and I will try to be really quick on them, but I think it's worth hearing. The first would be an update on our budget. I spoke with our Finance Committee representative, and Finance Committee voted to recommend the town manager's budget for the planning board. So that is our budget less $15,000, which was added, which was included for give me the word.
Co-op student.
Thank you, co-op student. So it stands there. It's likely to be approved, given that's the way it worked. We have 3 choices before the board, and we don't need to make a decision tonight. Those 3 choices are: do nothing. That would be that our requested budget stands $15,000 higher. The budget that's being put forward is $15,000 less, and just do nothing. We could vote to reduce our budget to match the value that's being put forward to finance committees putting forward to town meeting, or we could go to town meeting and argue that we need those $15,000 and see if they will give us that money. Those are our 3 options. I have my opinion as far as what we should do, but I'm curious what the board thinks, because we would have to make a decision at our next meeting if we wanted to do some of the options. So I'm not sure I need anything tonight other than to think about for our next meeting whether you want to do something different than just moving forward doing nothing. Doing nothing would mean that we'd get their budget less $15,000. So that's the first update I have. The second update I have is we got a draft back from Fuger. Life of me, I can't pronounce their name. The EFA consultants, and their draft suggests that we'll be able to do the inclusionary housing within the MBTA 3A district as we hoped. That is to match the Center Business District as well as the North Main. So this is good news. It's still just a draft. We will have to review it, get it finalized, get a warrant article together for the fall, and go through all the steps that need to happen. But this is the first step of a lot of, the next step of a lot of work that's happened over the last year. So I was thrilled to be able to mention that. I think just to be safe, the last thing I just want to mention as far as updates is that at our next meeting, which will be before town meeting, I sent to everyone the warrant for the town meeting, the warrant articles. we will need to, as a committee, decide if we want to have opinions on any town meeting articles so that we can, if asked, we can give that opinion at town meeting. So I would ask you all to look through the warrant carefully. There are about 5 that I think we could have an opinion on. One, obviously 5 and 6, which we discussed tonight. Article 31, which is related to 10 Converse Place. We could choose to have an opinion on that. I'm not saying we should or shouldn't. I just want everybody to think about it. So at our next meeting, for town meeting, we can think about it. Article 38, which looks at how town meeting works, which includes changing how long before you have now we have 7 days for a main motion before it's submitted. It might be changed to 13 days, which could impact how we do our work as we're finalizing a motion for town meeting. Article 39, which would add the planning board chair to the finance committee appointing committee. So that's something that we might be asked about our opinion. Article 49 revises the wetlands bylaw, so we might have an opinion. Article 50 revises the preservation of historically significant buildings, so we might have an opinion. And Article 53 revises the permanent street tree committee, and since we have a sitting member on that, we might have an opinion. So I would just encourage everyone to look at all of those articles, come to our next meeting with any ideas so that we can vote on them at our next meeting before town meeting. So those are the updates I have for you all. Are there any other updates from members of the board? I know it's late, but I had more and I edited it, so sorry.
That's great, thanks.
Okay. Taylor, do you have any updates, staff updates?
No.
Okay, that's perfect. So the next order of business is it's titled Approval of Town Meeting Report. I sent there's a memo in the packet, which is an outline of, since I only became chair at the last meeting, I have to quickly, Carrie had to do the same thing last year, quickly pivot to getting a presentation together for town meeting, which will be the first night of town meeting. It's under Article 3. So I sent a draft outline of topics that I'd like to cover. We don't have a big article this year, so I won't be focusing in on some big, we do have an article. We do have the floodplain remapping, but we don't have significant North Main or MBTA 3A. So I don't know if people had an opportunity to look at that draft. Given the lateness of tonight, I feel like perhaps people should review that and get back to me individually if there's things they want to add. In the past, the old moderator has requested that we have a vote to allow the chair, working with the vice chair and or the town planner, to prepare that presentation and bring it, because the old moderator required a vote. So depending on how you guys would like to do it, it would be helpful if I had a motion and a vote to present, working with, obviously with the vice chair and town planner. It would be helpful.
Yeah, I would move that.
Second.
So that's helpful. I would, before we call the vote, please get back to me with topics. There's the draft there, but that's really was just me sort of sitting down saying, what would I like to say? It's not been formatted yet. And then we can make sure the presentation says what we want it to say. And I'll work with John and Taylor to finalize it. Roll call vote. John?
Aye.
Carrie?
Aye.
Nick?
Aye.
I will vote aye as well. Thank you. But please do get back to me and we will make that presentation because we don't meet before the night of town meeting again.
Okay.
unless we
Wait,
need
when did you send that out, Brian?
It's in the packet.
Oh, it's in the packet. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Ian added it to the packet. It's kind of bare bones. It goes over
Mhm.
the general topics that I'd like to present.
Okay, great.
And then get back to me and I'll incorporate it in. I've got a little under 2 weeks to finalize it.
Super.
So with that, we can move to the approval of minutes. They were sent out separately by Ian. I think there might have been one last minute change. Ian, if you could just speak to that, and then potentially, if there's no questions on it, we can just vote them with the change that took place. You are still muted, Ian.
Sorry. The last minute change that was made today, I believe, was Jack's nomination to Housing Partnership Board was not on the last meeting minutes I sent, but the most recent ones that has been added, and he was nominated, and that was it.
Perfect. I'm trying. I had to move computers mid meeting, so I'm trying to find the dates that we have. I had reviewed them all, and they all were fine for me. If someone has that, the dates of
January 21st and April 1st.
Say that again. I apologies.
January 21.
1. Yep.
April 1.
So if anybody has any corrections they want to speak to, otherwise I would welcome a motion to approve the minutes of January 21st and April 1st.
Where's the copy of those, Brian?
Those were sent out under separate cover by Ian directly to us.
All right, great. Great.
So I reviewed them and I thought they look. I think I had a small edit somewhere, and I think Ian, you addressed that. There was one place where there was a correction, but you then sent out a revised version, so that's all set. So I would welcome a motion to approve them as amended.
So moved.
Second.
No discussion. Roll call vote. Nick?
Aye.
Carrie?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you, Ian, for getting those all prepared and sent out. Appreciate it. And we have no development reviews. So that leads us to adjournment. But before adjournment, just wanted to point out that there's a slight error on the typo. The next meeting will be 4/28, which is the first night of town meeting, not 4/29. And do we have a time on when we are meeting for that?
Should be town meeting starts at 6:30. We'll meet. We have it scheduled. We have the room scheduled starting at 5. So you can decide when you want to meet. You just let me know, and I'll and we'll post it.
So let's just have everybody get back as far as any articles that they think we might want to have an opinion on. If they're very few, then we can meet later, and if they're numerous, then we might need to meet earlier. But we can come up with that time between now and then. So if that works for everyone.
Sounds good.
It's 9:31. I would welcome that magic motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call, John.
Aye.
Carrie.
Aye.
Nick.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, WinCamp. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, all the petitioners. And thank you for all of our fans out there.
Well done, Chair. Bravo.
Thank you. Good
Very
night, all.
good. Good night.
You'll sleep better tonight than last night.
I will for sure.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Record.